Welcome to Inevitable Cast. Today's guest is Lee Rudin, founder of RUDIN LAW, a New Orleans-based personal injury firm helping clients take on insurance companies. Before starting his own firm, Lee spent years defending insurers, giving him insider knowledge on how claims are negotiated and fought.
Now I want to rebrand and really lean into this get rude attitude, partially because that's who I am, but the other part of it is I just think it's a sticky brand in a space that requires you to be unique so you don't get lost in the shuffle. And then it was my willingness to just say, let's do it. I've lost money on plenty of cases, but the mark you can make on somebody because you took a case that other people wouldn't take, that's invaluable because they're becoming your biggest champion because you did it. The one thing I did not envision in terms of growth was you bring on more people come with more salaries. You don't want to turn off the marketing spigot, especially when it's working. AI is like that assistant that sits outside your door that you give an assignment to. It is as good as the instructions you give it, but it's just a tool. If you're a lawyer who doesn't want to use AI because you're scared of it, you're going to get passed by.
Welcome to the Inevitable Cast. This podcast is sponsored by Inevitable Flow. Inevitable Flow helps architecture, engineering, and construction companies generate a consistent flow of qualified project leads using smart AI solutions. If you want to book a free consultation to find out more, click the link in the description of the show. Today's guest is someone who doesn't believe in being polite when the system is stacked against you. Lee Rudin is the founder of RUDIN LAW, a New Orleans-based personal injury firm built on a simple but powerful idea. Insurance companies don't respond to politeness. They respond to pressure. What makes Lee unique is that he didn't start on the plaintiff side. He spent years defending insurance companies, learning how they delay, deny, and devalue claims, and what actually forces them to pay attention. He's been named a Super Lawyers Rising Star for 8 straight years. He teaches trial advocacy to other attorneys and has built a fast-growing firm around one clear message: stop being polite, get rude. Lee, welcome to the show.
McGee, that's a good intro. I gotta record that, write it down, and repurpose it because that was a good one. I'll take it.
You didn't start as a plaintiff's attorney. You actually defended insurance companies. What originally pulled you into that side of the industry? And, at what point did you realize I don't want to be on this side of the table anymore?
It's funny you asked that, and I said this to someone the other day. It's great to want to save the world. I said it to a law student who's probably going to come clerk for me. And I said to her, if you come out of law school and you have no debt, then you can go save the world, right? Because, maybe you got to just cover your bills, but you don't have a big law school tuition bill to go back and pay. So, all the people that want to save the environment and they want to, and more power to them. They want to get people that shouldn't have been convicted. They want to pull them out of prison. That's great. But if you don't know how you're paying your rent, that's an immediate problem that you have to solve. And I think that's how people end up doing what I did, which is going to insurance defense or corporate defense jobs. It's because those are the jobs that are out there hiring when you come out of school and perhaps at a better rate than maybe a plaintiff personal injury firm might be. And, my advice to young lawyers, is if you want to go to the plaintiff side, great, as long as they'll train you. The one thing that has always been nice about being on the defense side is because you bill by the hour, they're good to train you and give you the hours to hone your craft. Because you got to learn how to be a lawyer before you can do any of the other crap.
Totally. How much of what you do today at RUDIN Law is informed by what you learned inside insurance defense?
I would say a large majority of it. Some of it's what do you know and how do you want to respond to it? Some of it is, hey, what kind of firm do I want to grow? What do I want it to be like for my people? So that's, working at a firm that bills by the hour versus working at a firm on a contingency fee model. Everything that I've experienced informs how we handle our clients, how we talk to adjusters, opposing counsel, because if you're not taking all of those lessons and using them to make yourself better, what did you go through them for?
Yeah, totally. It is clear that you leave a stable path on this insurance company side, and instead of doing what everyone does, you basically just go and start your own firm, but with a very specific stance. Rooting law feels very intentional, right? And how do you explain your business model to someone outside the legal world?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you see that, although I don't know that that's really the truth, right? So I left my firm because I liked this plaintiff side practice, and my firm was a defense firm, and so they didn't feel that it was appropriate for me to continue to grow it at their firm for pretty valid reasons. But I saw that this was really where my heart was. And so when I left in a hybrid model, meaning I had some insurance and other defense clients that I felt it was my professional obligation be and my personal obligation to see them through in whatever matters I was handling. So once I left, I handled those matters to conclusion, and then it was a natural break at the end of 2023 where I could say, okay, now I want to rebrand and really lean into this get rude attitude. Partially because that's who I am, but the other part of it is I just think it's a sticky brand in a space that requires you to be unique so you don't get lost in the shuffle. And so
Yeah.
there was proper timing. There was kind of a firm telling me that they made me the offer I had to refuse. And then it was my willingness to just say, fuck it, let's do it.
Yeah, yeah. That's at some point in your life you gotta say this. And you openly say that you take cases other lawyers won't touch. And I'm curious, like operationally, what does that mean for your team and your processes?
So I think you need to look at every case as an opportunity in one way or another, right? So, of course, what I'm a car accident lawyer. I joke I'm an ambulance chasing injury lawyer. Every every lawyer wants the rear ender 18 wheeler, legitimate injuries that require extensive medical treatment, and a great client that listens to your instructions and does what you're supposed to. They get you get them as better as you can, you get them as much money as you can. That's the home run. But those are hard to come by because everybody wants those. And when you're a young firm or a young business and you're trying to make your mark, sometimes you take cases that you might not take later on down the road. And not all of them are going to be big winners financially. In fact, I've lost money on plenty of cases. But the mark you can make on somebody because you took a case that other people wouldn't take, that's invaluable because they're becoming your biggest champion because you did it. I have a guy, it's a funky case. It looks like insurance fraud perpetrated by a repair shop. And so what we're doing is we're suing the repair shop and we're suing his own insurance company because they basically said, hey, like we paid for the repairs to be done and we're going to wash our hands of it. And I said, fuck if you are. You said you inspected the vehicle and the vehicle clearly hadn't any work done. So now your hands are covered in muck here and you're responsible for making this guy whole. And they said, well, we have already paid. I said, I don't care. Then you should go after that repair shop and give my client what he's entitled to, which is the repaired vehicle. So now we've got both of them mixed up. And this client, I mean, he's a great guy. And he's already referred us to other people because he said, Lee, like I couldn't get a firm to take this case. And I looked at it and I was like, there's a problem here. Do I know if we're going to make any money on it? I don't. But we'll make an impression on somebody. And hopefully down the road, that'll lead to us making money to keep the lights on.
Yeah, that makes total sense, Lee. As a business owner myself, I can relate to that a lot. I'm curious, how do you decide which cases are worth fighting all the way versus settling early?
So I think that requires, obviously, you have to have experience to know, is this one worth fighting? You have to have some financial wherewithal to look and say, does this make sense for the client? Not for me. Because if, I have clients and I'll tell them, look, this is a minimum policy. It's worth $15,000. I have one where the offer was 13,000. I said, yeah, do I think you're entitled to the 15? I absolutely do. Do I think mathematically it makes sense to go file a lawsuit to get the extra 2 grand? It really doesn't, because you file that lawsuit, it costs a certain amount of money. It's going to delay you at least probably 60 to 90 days for what? Now you're talking about a difference of $1,000. Is that really worth it? It's your call, but I'm telling you, I don't think so. And let them make the decision, because ultimately it's their case. And we have
Right.
to remember that in my field, like we got to remember that it's their case. If they don't want to go to the doctor, they think they feel good enough, even though they're not 100%. That's their call. It's their life that's been impacted, and we are just their service providers, their mercenaries to go do the thing that they're asking us to do, as long as it's ethical and as long as we think that it's within our realm as the attorney, and we're willing to do it. Because sometimes you got to tell the client, I'm absolutely not doing that, like for a variety of reasons. I'm not doing it. If you want someone else to
Yeah.
do it, go get another lawyer.
Yeah, and that brings me to a question I've been curious to ask. Let's talk about what's actually happening inside the firm right now. What kind of cases are dominating your workload right now?
I'd say we're probably about, let's say out of 100% mix, I'd say we're 80 to 85% auto accident. We're about another 10% on premises, slip and fall type stuff, 10 to 15%. And then there's just this other hodgepodge of injury related cases. We had a big explosion couple, parishes away. I had a client whose house was within the range. She's having some sickness, but there's also like environmental damage because it was a big plant that like spewed oil all over people's land and houses and cars and livestock. So like there's these weird cases that are just also in the mix for a variety of reasons. But bread and butter, car accidents, premises, slip fall, trip fall, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Are you seeing any noticeable changes in client expectations compared to even 2 or 3 years ago?
I don't know if it's client expectations, but the one thing I've observed, and I can see the dialogue when it's happening, is the client who thinks that ChatGPT as their lawyer is smarter than me as their lawyer. And I just fired a client because
Hmm.
he straight up said to me, he's like, I don't trust you. He didn't trust anybody, but he didn't trust me. I said, then we can't work together. I was like, this is a position of trust, right? I'm a trusted advisor to you. If you don't trust me, if you don't trust that I have your best interest in mind, we shouldn't work together. Because what's going to happen is when we get all the way to the end and I show you the settlement statement and I show you where the costs went and I show you what my fee was, I know what's going to happen. We're going to reach that impasse after I've done all the things and I've documented it all. And you've been walking with me along the way. I'd rather you either handle it yourself if you feel like you're capable, go get another lawyer that you do trust, or another one that's willing to accept that you don't trust him or her, but they'll represent you anyway. That's not the position I want to be in.
Yeah, yeah. And this naturally brings us to friction because, as you know, growth always creates pressure. And I wonder what's the hardest part about running a modern personal injury firm right now that no one warned you about when you started?
Cash flow, baby, cash flow. I know that that's the reality, right? But the one thing I did not envision in terms of growth was you bring on more people come with more salaries. You don't want to turn off the marketing spigot, especially when it's working. So like that money goes out and you don't realize a benefit from it, probably at best 90 to 120 days, at worst years. So, it's great to say, hey, I've got a docket of hundreds of cases. but the income that you would realize from those, it's not here yet. And, the payroll doesn't stop and holiday bonuses don't stop and retirement contributions and the rent and all that. So, that's definitely a pain point. It's a resolvable pain point, but, it's still something that makes you somewhat uncomfortable from time to time.
Yeah, um, couldn't agree more on that side of things. And do you think that insurance companies are evolving? I mean, of course they are, but my question is, where do you feel they are getting smarter or maybe better, sneakier, as you battle them face to face?
Well, you know what I think it is? They're massive machines. My dad used to, he said this relative to casinos, but I can say relative to insurance companies. He used to say when I'd walk out of the casino and tell him, "Oh, Dad, I won $1,000." And he'd say, "Lee, you know why they have those big buildings? It's not because you win over time, right? You got your lick in now, but they're going to get it back from you. That's why they have the big buildings like that." And I think about that in the context of, when Allstate's sponsoring the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans on January 1st, or they've got their names on stadiums and skyscrapers. It's not because they're all going bankrupt, despite what they might want to say when it comes time for tort reform or when people are complaining about the premium hikes. So, what do I think I see? I'm seeing that they're taking judgment out of the hands of humans. So, I'll get on a phone with an adjuster that I have a good relationship with, and I'll say, "Okay, how many times we got to go back and forth for you to finally get me to the number that I know you have?" And it's because literally they need to take my offer, put it in the computer, let the computer spit out their response, and back and forth and back and forth. So the human negotiation doesn't exist anymore on their side. And so, how do we fight fire with fire? We have to also harness our data and know, okay, what's this insurance company more likely than not going to do? Even if we still want to perform the art of negotiation, where do we think they're going to go? And if they tell us, "Hey, we're just not going to get there," okay, fuck them, file suit. And let's see what happens when it gets on the desk of the lit adjuster or the defense lawyer. See if they change their tune, because now there is a human involved that ultimately may be able to make this decision.
Right, there we go. Yeah. I mean, I think your answer clearly illustrates what I was after with the question. Um, in terms of impact and notable wins, if you could tell us a story, what's a case or outcome that, still sticks with you? Not because of the dollar amount, maybe, but because of the impact.
I've got a couple, but the two that I like to recount were um, there's one, both of them relate to actually hurricane cases that we had in New Orleans back in 2021. Those cases really matured and came to resolution in, I want to say, end of 2023, maybe early 2024. I had one where the insurance company just like it was really the insurer of last resort, and they didn't have any penalties they were going to have to pay. It was just, do they want to pay this amount or not? And I looked at the client and I said, "I don't think the offer they're making you is fair, at least not based upon what you've told me and what I've seen. So you want to go to trial?" And they said, "Yep." And we went. And did we get the result that I wanted? No, we ended up getting just a little bit more than the offer that was made prior to trial. That was because the client didn't take my advice, and there were a couple of issues with the presentation, but that is what it is. The end result, though, was that I felt phenomenal that the client wanted to go to trial. I had the power now to say, "Yes, let's go." Because now I'm the boss. I'm not answering to an insurance company or a senior partner who might say, let's just take the deal. Let's convince them to do this or that. It's like, no, if the client wants to go and you are willing to make the investment in time and in money, like, go to trial and show the insurance company that you will go to trial. And then what happened? That same insurer of last resort ended up putting what I know to be the biggest number on a settlement of anybody that I know that's handling these cases, right? So because we were willing to push on one case, on the next one, they came back and said, "You know what? We're going to pay this one." And I think that's a story from a lot of lawyers that will push a case to trial is, again, it's not that particular case, but when they know you're willing to go, it's the next one or the one after where they say, no, you know what? We'll write that check, save ourselves the money.
Your reputation precedes you,
That's
right?
it. That's it.
Yeah. And as a business owner, Lee, how do you measure success beyond, verdicts or and settlements?
I'm watching. So we're a new business, Guy, and we are trying to build a reputation. We're trying to make sure people know who we are. And we're running ads on social media. We're pretty heavy in Meta, so Facebook, Instagram. We've got stuff going on YouTube. Nothing on TV, nothing on radio, no billboards, right? So none of your traditional, a lot of digital. And then we practice the hand-to-hand combat of grassroots marketing, right? We give out merch, we have events that we sponsor, and we just go out and meet the people. And as I see people calling my firm, filling out my ads on social media, filling out my questionnaires to become potential clients with their cases. That to me tells me that the messaging is resonating. And that's all you really want as a firm. You want to have a brand and a message that people will gravitate towards because it's a loud space with a lot of people that look like me. And so they're not going to hire me because of how I look, because there's a lot of white male lawyers. So they've got to hire me for something else. And I hope that it's because we're delivering a different message that they're receptive to. And then none of it matters if you don't actually deliver results. So my social media guy is like, Rude gets results. I'm like, all right, I'll run with it.
I mean, I've been looking at your profile, and you're very vocal publicly, especially on LinkedIn. Some of your posts, has like hundreds of likes and comments, and you often, in a narrative about, how the system really works, which is, really well done. I gotta compliment you on how you're approaching all of this, and your marketing guy as well. And so it's clear that you've built a strong voice online, and that is yielding results to you. But why was it important for you to be public about these issues? Do you
When
think is there any like hidden message that the people needed to know that you're kind of like carrying this message? Why do you think that is?
Yes, I've always been the kind of kid, when I was younger, I was always the spokesperson. For better or worse, I was always the spokesperson. I remember like being a summer camp counselor and the kids we had an issue amongst us. And I was going to be the one to go and like bring the issue to the administration. And I've always just been that person. And I think the problem in this world, and I hear this when people say, oh, stop being polite. Well, like, aren't we supposed to teach our kids to be polite? I was like, yeah, but there's context here. We live in a world with a whole bunch of fucked up shit going on right now. And maybe people need to stop being so politically correct about things that matter. I'm not saying that like the public discourse doesn't need to tone down because it does. But when something is going the wrong way, like we should be saying that, right? Like if you're not happy with how things are in society, saying nothing is definitely not the answer. And so that's what the whole stop being polite thing to me. My kid goes to a school and her motto is be kind. And my wife is always like, you should sponsor this thing and sponsor that thing. And I said, I will, as long as I can make merch that says be kind, get rude. And when the administration says to me, well, what about like why are we going to do that? I'm like, don't you want your little girls and little boys, your kids that are maybe they're minorities or maybe they come from a lower income background and like they're gonna get pushed down in society if they don't stand up for themselves. So don't we want to teach them to stand up and like speak out so that they're heard? Like that's all we really want if we're trying to mold young men and women. So I think stop being polite and get rude works quite well if that's the messaging.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Definitely, uh, catches people attention. It's like, what is this guy talking about? Get rude. Um, um, I do like to touch on, your perspective on AI for what you do. So my question to you is, where do you see AI or automation, realistically helping law firms, not replacing lawyers, but perhaps removing friction? Where do you see the biggest opportunities and the biggest threats right now?
Yeah. So I look at AI and I've used this analogy. AI is like that assistant that sits outside your door that you give an assignment to. It is as good as the instructions you give it, but it's just a tool. And so if you use it in the way that it is designed to be used, it's incredibly effective. So I love it as a tool. It's great in terms of document processing. We use it for medical summarization and review. The other part of your question was about automations. I think that if you can idiot proof certain things by removing the human element, because humans can be forgetful, they can be inconsistent, computers are not. And so if you can simply write in the code, give the instruction for the automation, meaning, hey, we put this insurance company into our system. As soon as that happens, generate the letter of representation. Like we didn't just put them in there because they're there because they're the insurance company for this party. Great, generate it. And then we send it. Right? But you've taken several steps out of the mix. And so the human element, maybe that has to be there at the very end to push send, maybe not. But I don't think that humans get removed from the equation, at least not ones that know how to leverage technology. But if you don't, if you're a lawyer who doesn't want to use AI because you're scared of it, you're going to get passed by.
Yeah, I would agree with what you said word by word. I tend to say that, AI who can help do like 80% of the work and humans do like the remaining 20%, but the 20% of the work that humans do corresponds to 80% of the value that is delivered, right? So humans are always going to be in the loop, and AI is basically a tool to make us, do our job in a smarter, faster, better way. That's how I see it.
I agree. But I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that if you remove the human element entirely, you're going to get these glaring errors that are going to reflect so terribly on the human because all it took was getting involved in the smallest way to have avoided the error. But I think it goes back to humans sometimes being lazy and thinking that they've got all the answers when really it just goes back to um, we have to be involved. We have to take responsibility for the thing, even if we're using a
Yeah.
tool to get us there.
Yeah, critical thinking is always on the human side. AI can create like four interior design like images, but it cannot choose what the best one is, right? So that's like the human critical thought is essential in this process.
Well,
But Lee,
that's going to be a problem, Guy, right? Because I think that's where AI, like the real fear I have is that so many humans have removed critical thinking from their consciousness. And so, like, you wonder how certain things have happened in our politics. And it's like because people, they can't tell truth from fiction. So, like, they can be fed propaganda and they're gonna, now we're gonna have deep fakes and these videos and, we're not gonna know what the truth is. Well, you might not because you don't know how to look at something and say, oh, that's not my best friend hanging out with Lionel Messi at the McDonald's down the block. Yeah, no, of course it's not. Why would he be here? Anyway,
totally. Yeah, I mean, but Lee, as we approach the end of this conversation, I want to look forward with you. And I want to ask you, what are the most excited about building, you know, RUDIN law? Like, what's next?
yeah, I mean, my favorite part of the business is the marketing. And so, that is always after we get off this call, like I'm going to spend about an hour just trying to game plan. What does that look like for us in 2026? For me in particular, in that grassroots way, I really want to focus on um, strengthening our relationships with our clients, our past clients, because a lot of times you get through a case and the client puts it behind them and you put the client behind you, but it's important to continue to build those relationships. And that's not just a law need. It's really every business because, if you've done something for someone in construction, like what does it cost you to go back to them, send them a gift, even a small little token every once in a while just to stay top of mind so that when they have a friend looking for a referral, they remember your name. We're a heavy referral business in the plaintiff personal injury space. So we're out there trying to chase after these people that don't know us. We really should be focused on making sure the people that do know us and like us and trust us, they remember to refer us when one of their friends, family members, or neighbors has a need. So that's where I'm focused on and what I'm excited about because I think we're going to do some really great things.
That sounds really exciting, Lee. Let's dream a little bit. What would operational freedom actually look like for you?
Probably have to add a couple more C-suite execs, have them report to me. Like if I'm the chief operating officer, well, if I'm the chief marketing officer and the chief financial officer and the CEO, I probably have to find people in those seats that then, can report up to me as the owner or the CEO. I've got, a litigator, I've got an operations guy. My team, my segments of the business are running really well right now, but there maybe aren't captains over those different sections. And so that's as we grow, that's probably the next place we start slotting people in. And that gives me some more time to do the visioning and do the stuff I like the videos and the marketing.
Amazing. And Lee, as a closing question, it is clear that you have achieved a lot with RUDIN Law so far, and you have much more ahead of you. If you could wave a magic wand and solve one obstacle that is holding you back today, what would that be?
I think it's finding the right mix of team members, right? And making sure, we're a diverse team. We have folks offshore, we have folks here in the greater New Orleans area and throughout the United States. So I'm still trying to work through, where do I want people? What's the value versus, with being local versus being international? So that's something that I'm still playing with. I have a good mix. I think it can be better. So we're just trying to hone some of those positions and find the right people in the right seats. Because I think when you get that, we have good systems, everything's going to really hum. And, then that the clients are getting taken care of, the business is taken care of, and you can think about how you grow next.
I think there is no better way to end this episode. Thank you, Rudy. Lee, I appreciate you very much.
Thank you for having me, Guy. I appreciate you.
It was a pleasure having you here. That brings us to the end of this episode. Okay, this podcast is sponsored by Inevitable Flow. Inevitable Flow help architecture, engineering, and construction firms generate a consistent flow of qualified project leads using AI-powered outbound systems, so they can grow revenue without hiring a sales team or relying on unpredictable referrals. If you want to book a free consultation to find out more, click the link in the description of the show. I'll see you next time.
That's a wrap, all brought to you by Inevitable Flow. Links in the description.